Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Monica Wright, the Chief Program Officer of the network. I'd like to welcome you to today's Cafe Conversations. And before we get started, I have a few reminders. And our event, as you can tell, is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please go ahead and drop from the bridge. And because we're recording, we want to ensure that everyone remains muted so that we can get all the nuggets that will be shared today. There's a lot of wisdom that we're going to gain from this conversation. And we are planning to have time for questions as well. So today, for our Cafe Conversations, we have the network's Chief Compliance Officer and CEO-elect, Gina McCrae. And we have with us today Coach, CEO, founder of No Silos Communications, LLC, and author of No Thanks, 7 Ways to Say I'll Just Include Myself, L. Michelle Smith. Ladies, welcome. And without further delay, you won't hear my voice until we get into maybe some of the questions. We'll gather those when we get to that section of today's conversation, and you can also submit them to me in chat, and we'll introduce them to our guests today. So thank you, ladies. I won't delay. We'll get started.
Thank you, Monica. Appreciate it so much. I was like, what is she talking about? Introduce people. I'm like, who is that?
Who are these people?
Thank you guys so much to our members for taking time out to join. I know there's a lot of other things. We were just talking before we started. A lot of stuff still going on, business and events and things like that. So thank you guys for choosing us to spend the next hour with, and then definitely to Miss L. Michelle Smith. Thank you so very much for reaching out, to us and being so willing to come home. Welcome, welcome for sure. We're so excited to have you, and I'm so excited for this book, guys, to get in and talk. I got my highlights, stuff all marked up, but I'm gonna try not to. I really want to hear from Michelle. I want you guys to be able to hear from Michelle. It is an amazing, amazing read. I want to definitely, for those of you that have already read it, you already know, but for those of you that have not, you are in for a treat. So I don't want to take up, too much more time. I was saying I want to definitely get in and go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to start, this is Michelle, basically. I know you discussed it in the book. Again, thanks for being here. But why did you feel the need to write this book? We need this book. Oh, I think we're still muted. Monica, I think we're muted.
How am I now? Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay. All right. I'll start over. Thank you so much, Gina, Madam CEO-elect, and also to Monica for pulling this together. I really appreciate it. To the membership, some of you I know very, very well. Some of you are new friends. I welcome all of you. Thank you for having me. So to the question, Gina, why I wrote the book. Actually, there are several books that are coming down the pike. This is actually one of them. And this book was actually, it began about 3 years ago, while I was still working there, actually. And it was a result of the content that I was writing and developing on behalf of not just Black enterprise, but I was also touring and speaking all over the place and hearing from women, and especially women of color, on some of the issues that they were up against. And it reflected a lot of my experience, but my experience is a little bit different because so many of those women were career corporate executives in the Fortune 500. And my experience was career executive in global agencies as well as a serial entrepreneur. So it was interesting to contrast some of the things that were going on inside of the corporate walls and some of the things that were going on outside.
Definitely. I just even thinking, I don't know, I wish I had, well, I'm not going to say that, right, because I read the book. Definitely can write a book, right, if I wanted to kind of sit down and do that, but just what it took, I feel like, for you to to pour into this, and that you have more, projects coming is amazing. We've been talking a lot just in the world, especially and then with AT&T about inclusion, just with everything that's happening, everything that's going on. Just how can we make sure that everybody's included? And one of the things that I really wanted to just jump on real quick is in the intro you talk about inclusion, but you talk about this different aspect of inclusion about empowering yourself. Inclusion is empowering yourself. So tell us a little bit about how you got there to that conclusion.
Yeah, well, first of all, hats off to all of the companies, especially AT&T, that stays at the top of the Diversity Inc., top 50. There are companies that are trying, but the truth of the matter is that these institutions weren't built with people of color, people in the margins in mind. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is make a square peg fit in a round hole. And it's tough. You probably know that already. But to level set, there's a reason why. And the reason is absolutely this: it was not built with us in mind. Now we've come along. And while we have companies that are trying to get there, what do we do in the meantime? That's the primary question that this book raises. But the other thing that you need to know is this book is primarily a leadership book. Yes, there's inclusion and diversity all the way through it. You can't help it because we're talking to women of color. But this is a leadership book, and it takes some classic leadership tenets and applied positive psychology, and of course, tenets from executive coaching to coach you through how to switch your mindset to a mode that will take you to the C-suite. And that's why we talked to several of the ladies in the book, talk a lot about my career, making VP before I was 30. It was just interesting coming into this window of time at the company. But I talk a little bit about my time there, but I also talk about my time in some other places. But what I've realized is this idea of transformational leadership that you hear so often in the career conferences, in the leadership conferences. When you boil it down, it's someone who is not afraid to run to the risk. And culturally, and when I say culturally, I just don't mean the skin color. I mean generationally. I'm talking about our faith. I'm talking about anything that we bring to the table. So much of what we bring is diametrically opposed to taking risk. I'll leave it right there for right now.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, I want to jump on and go in a different, kind of explore some things a little bit more for sure. Just in thinking, and I know you mentioned about the book being a definite leadership guide, and I was so excited. I haven't, I don't know why I don't want to write in the book yet.
Well, you're supposed to. Each chapter actually has a place for it.
And all of that at the end, but I've kind of written on it. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking, okay, are these my 3 superpowers, right? Like, so I'm like, okay, once I think then I'm gonna write it in the book. But
well, get your journal and write alongside, okay?
Yes. Just looking at that and just seeing, the Rockstar Leadership coaching guide, along with the 7 affirmations and everything. And talking about that for sure, which is where we're going to spend most of our time today, just kind of talking and sharing. But before we jump into that, the 3 aspects that you mentioned about entrepreneurship, right? So there is intrapreneurship, entrepreneurship, which we're all, kind of familiar with. But the one that I was like, yes, one was the extrapreneurship.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I feel like, that's a good segue, for you to kind of talk about that a little bit, but also tell us about no silos communication and what that is.
So that's a great question to piggyback off of the idea of transformational leadership. At the core of the characteristics of a transformational leader, if you really break it down, it's someone who has an entrepreneurial mindset. Now, that may scare some of you because you're like, I'm not trying to start a business. Yeah. But listen, if you look at what they're saying about transformational leaders, they're willing to not just run to the risk, but to instigate change and manage through it. Now, that's very different from a manager that keeps the status quo, right? You're making the widgets. You're making sure everybody's making the widgets. They're getting done on time. You're checking the boxes, right? That won't get you promoted. The thing that will get you promoted is the person who will take a risk. Now, on the other side of risk, what scares most of us is a failure. Now, we hear it all the time, you fail, you learn. Yes, absolutely. But this book is culturally nuanced, and we talk about the things that we bring to the table into our workspaces, virtual or otherwise, every day that hold us back. What you need to know is that the villain in the book is fear. It's not white people, it's not white privilege. It's not any of that. The villain in the book is fear. And so you have to be able to reach into yourself, know your value, know where you come from, actually know who you are. And so many of us don't know who we are. That before we can even become authentic, we've got to know who we are. And that knowledge of self and the hard work that goes with it. And by the way, it's an executive coach in the book. It will take you through exactly what to do to get to those things, to start to uncover that in yourself. Because as an entrepreneur, one that's outside of the corporate structure right now, you got to believe you got to have it in your DNA to do it on your own. Now, we talk about entrepreneurship. That's the safest way to do it, y'all. You can still engage ideas of entrepreneurship and tenets of it inside an organization that has the funding, right? That has all of what you need so that you don't feel like you're out there, trying to put food on your table. You've got a paycheck. So why not innovate while you're inside of the organization? Don't just make the widgets. You may be making those widgets so well and wondering why are people passing me up? No, you need to come up with an idea that solves a problem, at least one, and know that it might fail and be okay with it. Now that's where we get to some of the mindset that we're not used to doing, because our parents, we watch them, okay? Now, very few of us have parents that became Mr. Huntley or became Corey Anthony or these officers that we're seeing at AT&T and other places too. Most of our parents got out of school, if they went to school, got that good job, held on to that good job, did not rock the boat. Don't rock the boat. You didn't talk about diversity and inclusion. What was that? Right? You didn't talk about any of that. The whole greater good. No, no, no. You put your head down. You wait for somebody to tap you on the shoulder when it's time to move on. But if you're still in your place, you're okay with that. You're getting a check every 2 weeks. You're getting your pension. You might even be getting some stocks. And you end up retiring. You get your grandkids. You might even get a nice place in Florida. But I encourage people at the very beginning of this book to go back to the things they dreamed about. There is research that shows that Black women are some of the most ambitious, not a bad word, ambitious women who want and have C-suite aspirations. But the question becomes, what happens? There's a gaping hole in the leadership pipeline, and it's spewing Black women. It's spewing for a few different reasons. One, you're either getting pushed out. Two, or you've decided, I'm fed up with this. I want to run my thing. I'm a boss. I know I am. I'm over-credentialed. The U.S. Census says that. Most over-educated segment of all. We have the most advanced degrees, more degrees than a thermometer. But here we are being spewed out, and we're starting businesses faster than anybody else. We are transformational leaders. It's in our DNA. We talk about it in the book, those actual traits that we bring to the table that are already in us, and you need to discover those. But the thing is this, we've watched our parents do that. So we fear, we've seen it modeled, and we decide that's the way we should live. Now, let me give you another stat. Before the pandemic, before this economic crisis, before this crisis in leadership and this crisis and this cultural crisis in racism and anti-Blackness, companies were already declaring that they weren't going to keep workers more than 3 to 5 years. That includes upper management. Newsflash, people are scaling to move faster in this digital economy. We all know what that means. You're all involved in the transformation. And as you build and you scale, there's typically scaling down. They call it right sizing. They're getting ready to compete, especially these industrial companies, to compete with the Googles and the Facebooks and all of that good stuff. So you're seeing a peeling off, kind of a sloughing off of the extra. How do you make sure you're not in that extra? Well, that That's debatable. Now, the one thing that can happen, you want to be one of these innovative leaders, but then there's politics and everything else that, falls in there. But in order to be ready, you really need to be talking to yourself. You need to be building inside of that company, but you've got to be leaning out in order to lean in. And that's where the entrepreneurship comes in. You want to stop right there before we talk about that?
No, let's just go on. Let's go. I'm
Okay.
excited about that piece just because I feel like, you mentioned, that we are as Black women, just in a minute. I think, I don't know how many I've seen, my daughter included, just, I'm about to go do this. Like, I don't want to do this 9 to 5. I don't want to be stuck. And not that there is anything wrong, right, with what our parents did, because of coming along with the times, right? That's just that's what you aspire to. Each generation aspires to do better than the next. And, now that we're here, I mean, I'm in the middle of that where I'm like, get a good job, go to school, get a good job, hang out with this job, try to make it happy, that I want to come here every day, that I want to be here every day. But in my mind, I'm fearful of that little bug that's in the back for me that says, you are an event planner.
Yeah.
And it shows in everything that, that I do, in the, when we were in the office, right? In the office, planning stuff, taking care of things, you're the person, you're the go-to. So it's not that you can't do it, but that fear of, I don't know, I can't just leave, this job.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, you don't have to leave. What you need to do is grab change by the horns before it grabs you. And that means that you've got to do some leaning out in order to lean in. Now, let's talk about leaning out, okay? The entrepreneurship, that's kind of the obvious thing. Nurture your passions. If you can monetize it, great. Because what you want to do is make sure you have multiple streams of income. Gone is a day that you need to depend on one company for one thing. Just throw it out the window. Be done with it. Let me tell you what it does. It gives you confidence. In order to run to the risk, you need to know that you have what Trudy Bourgeois says, FU money in the bank, okay? So if you need to go in and say something that needs to be said, you won't be worried about them calling you hard to work with. You won't be worried about them calling you angry Black woman. You won't be concerned because you have other opportunities. Now, the other thing that happens, in chapter 2, I walk into the office of a very high-ranking officer who asked me a very, very pointed question. He said, "Why are you here?" And I was thrown. I was thrown. I didn't know what he meant. And so I went through this whole thing. Well, my former boss from this agency was embedded in. He said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Why are you here? You're too good for this place. Why are you here? Now, what he was actually saying, and I didn't realize in that moment, do you know your value? That's what he was asking me. He was not saying you need to leave. That's not what he was saying. And ultimately, you'll see in that thread, that storyline, he says, go and find your market value. That didn't mean leave. That meant go find out how much you're worth monetarily. Do you know how much that nugget of information will do you some good when you come back to the organization? You will know your value and you can walk taller in your power and you can do what needs to be done to run to the risk. So, entrepreneurship, I encourage you once and for all to go back to what you dreamed about, even back when you were in high school. Some of you even earlier than that, and find out what you're passionate about. It's going to do a few things. One, it's going to reignite you outside of the company and give you a little bit more pep in your step when you walk back into it. Okay. The other thing is you're going to be upskilling because you're going to learn something about business, even if you don't get that LLC, even if you don't go start, a salon. You don't even have to do that. You can go get some investments in real estate. You could go get some investments in trading, something that is going to get that extra flow of income coming to you, but you also learn something that you can bring back to the organization. This is something that some people are doing, and I have some new research that's happening right now, and I'm finding that we're seeing more Black women and even men that have that something on the side. Now, I don't say side hustle. And there's a reason why I don't say side hustle.
Yeah.
Y'all, we are fine people, fine cars, fine clothes, fine credentials. We have poured into ourselves. Ray hustles, okay? Ray is the one, and no shade to Ray, he's doing his thing. But Ray is just trying to make another dollar. We have a plan. We have credentials. We know how to build business ecosystems. We know how to use weapons of mass innovation in technology. We have cultivated something. So please elevate. Don't call it a side hustle.
Yes. Extrapreneurship. I love it. I'm here for it, for sure. We already jumped into, right, the 7 affirmations, starting with the first one, which was I know who I am, and I find value in my story.
Yes.
So just finding the value in all of that. And we talked a little bit, we know the book talks about your story and, just where you're coming into, and then knowing your value is a core mindset. So if you don't know your own value, and you also mentioned about knowing your roots and uncovering your story, you have to do those things.
Yes.
So that you can find out what that value is. Anything else you want to share on that?
Yes. There is a chapter in there about being your authentic self, and we wrestle with the idea of, gee, if we are double outsiders, according to the research, and gosh, we already knew it anyway, by our melanin and our DNA, right? we are we are double outsiders. How then can you successfully be your authentic self? I want to leave that question out there for just a moment while we deal with this value question, because the deal is, you can't be authentic if you don't know who you are. What I hear from clients all the time, I hear people, they tell me all the time, I'm really good at this. So they tell me that I should do blah, blah, blah. How often have we gotten that from friends, colleagues, leaders, mentors, sponsors, even family members that have spoken into our lives? And then one day we wake up and we're like, this isn't what I wanted to do, but you're doing it and you're in it and you're making all this money doing it and you're not even happy. How many of y'all has that happened to? It's so easy to do. In fact, in this book, I talk about another confrontation that I had. It was a nice confrontation with a woman named Trudy Bourgeois, who I mentioned to you before. She is a mentor coach of mine, and you've seen her. She's shown up at AT&T. She's one of the coaches there. But listen, she asked me, what is it that I wanted to do? And I knew that this was very much attached to that other question that was asked to me on the 37th floor. And I didn't have an answer. Y'all, 25 years in business. And I did not know the answer to that. I knew what people had told me. And I gave her that answer. And it was a good one, too. People were saying, yeah, you should be in the C-suite. Yeah, okay. So I gave her that. But I hadn't done the hard work. And the hard work goes into your life and peels back the good and the bad. Listen, there's no separating your personal from your professional. You're all one person. You bring everything in that door with you and you take it all out. And guess what? Now that we're in this predicament and we're all virtual, how many of you know that your life is all one thing? Your house kind of shows it, right? You got homeschool right next door, like I do, right? You got your husband, your spouse right there with you all the time. And either this crisis has brought you together or you're getting to know yourself in a way right there at work. Work is with you. It just, crisis does that, doesn't it? So you gotta understand the very DNA of your personality, the DNA of your temperament. I reach back and talk about my great grandmother. You've got to understand generationally what brought you to this point, the good and the bad, divorces, the kids, the deaths, everything that's happened in your life. It makes you you. And guess what? Your leadership platform comes from that. But you've got to be able to put yourself first and bet on your brand. Bet on your own brand.
Yeah. So all of these things in talking about that, and I'm looking at the time. Let me move on so I can kind of make sure we can get to through the end. So the second I'm going to read the second and the third affirmation. So I'll be excellent and I'll be good with the skin I'm in. And then I recognize there indeed is a problem, and I will confront it. Those two, and they all the 7 affirmations guys definitely tied together. But those two, the one in being excellent, being good in the skin I'm in, what my pulled away or what I was thinking about for me is the being Black and unbothered.
Yes.
That, and then even just to go with the story that you mentioned about the lady in Jason's Deli asking if you spoke French. Those two, because I was just like, so let me tell. When you said, I want you to go look up this word microaggression, so you can see why I felt away about how you did that. And for me, I think just being, I felt like, I'm comfortable in my skin. I know I'm Black, I'm cool, I'm beautiful, it's cool, but I do have that. Oh, she's bossy. Oh, she was so mean all the time. Why she, and people who know me, right, are like, what? No, or maybe and I always get that, when I first met you, I didn't know, I thought you were going to be this way. And so that unbothered, because that bothered me, like just that piece of that, like, why, what am I giving up? Like, I'm this serious face, or the RPF, and, people like to try to put that stipulation on it. I'm in thought. I'm thinking of a plan. I'm trying to, so I'm serious right here. It's not, play, but that being Black and being unbothered, and the microaggression. Let's talk about that for just a little bit.
Well, I make the statement that being Black and unbothered is a process. You just don't arrive there one day instantly. It takes time. And I speak with Cynth Marshall. I speak with Cheryl Grace. I speak with Cheryl Atkins Green, and Trudy Bourgeois, the 4 ladies that are in the book, all mentors and sponsors of mine. And they all arrive at the same point, and that is you have to give your magic in doses. We're not talking about code switching. Code switching is fundamentally a little problematic. Let me tell you why. It means that at some point you're covering who you really are. You might switch, but you're probably going to switch when you leave, right? When you're not in that situation, not in that space. What we're saying is style flexing. You dial it up and you dial it down. But that's something that you learn over time, but only after you have performed excellently. You've got to be killing it every time before you can bring your whole self to the door. Now, let me tell you something. Being Black and beautiful right now is on trend. It's on a trend. So there's certain things about us that they're going to accept. Other people are going to accept. But they're tropes, these common tropes you're talking about, Gina. Hard to work with, aggressive, angry, whatever it might be. You could go down the list, okay? Those are the ones that stay in there and hover over us and cause us to fear being called that. But here's the thing. There are other aspects to the magic that we bring. And some of it, a lot of it, is excellence, okay? And that's the one that bothers folks the most. And then they turn to the tropes, okay? So look at this. If you're in an environment where white maleness is centered, okay? Just because this is the nation we live in, this is where we are, okay? And you're on the outside. The expectation is that you aren't at the table making decisions, speaking up, leading. Okay? So when you walk into your power and you start to lead and you're looking people in the eye and you're confronting the microaggressions and you're saying things that they don't expect you to know because you're not centered. That's also the power of your magic. That is the power of your diversity. I don't want you to get confused that it's just your skin color and it's just the fact that you're female. It's the fact that you're that and you're excellent, okay? People will have a problem with that because privilege actually is, and there are all sorts of privileges, okay? You can be in different spaces and have different privileges and exercise those, but we're going to deal with just a general privilege right now. It doesn't matter. Let's talk about Amy Cooper. Amy Cooper in Central Park in New York, if you recall, was walking her dog. And Christian Cooper, a black man, was in the park. He notices a sign says, all dogs need to be leashed. Her dog was not leashed. Beautiful dog, right? He tells her, leash your dog. Amy flips her lid. Now, if you read anything about Amy, Amy is very much pro Black Lives Matter. She is liberal. She is all of these things. But something in Amy flipped. Amy didn't like the fact that Christian put himself in charge. That's what we're talking about here, people. You walk into a space and you command your space. People will not be comfortable with it. You need to understand that that is a fact. Now, what are you going to do with it? What's the opportunity in it? Now, Christian went on and did what he was supposed to do. He literally flipped the privilege. He came in and he said, no, the sign says, leash your dog. She gets on the phone. She does the whole thing. And he records the whole thing. Now, this could have gone another way. You know that. But the courage this man showed, that's what I'm asking you to tap into. We have generation over generation over generation of courage and bravery and resilience of walking right into the problem and still standing tall. That's the key to this entire book. You've got to find your value. You've got to hold on to it, because that's the thing that's going to allow you to walk into those situations and know this thing could go either way and still stand in your power. Why? Because you know you have opportunities outside the company. You know you have value in this extra money that you're bringing in. You know that you can go build and fix things. And yeah, you might be still a little bit of afraid. You might have fear, but you're going to push through it.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me think it is kind of funny. I don't know if anybody watches Everybody Hates Chris, or even it used to come on. And
that's a good one.
Sheena Arnold's character, she's the mom and homie, whatever. And the thing, I don't know why I think about this all the time, but she, like if I'm in this situation or something, or, you have that where you're like, I don't have to deal with this. Like, I'm better than this. And the thing that she would always say is, my man got 2 jobs. Like, I don't have to. There's always, but I understand that to mean I don't have to deal. You're not going to just treat me or talk to me any kind of way. You can't, I demand a certain level of, of respect and, how you're going to treat me and all of that. And I always just hear that little thing, whenever it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, we're not doing
and Gina, this is how we're creating our own equality. This is how we're creating our own inclusion. We're including ourselves. If we sit there and we wait, may or may not happen, okay? Probably won't. Yeah. Odds are, and the numbers show, it's not. So what are you going to do about it? You have to lean out into these things, build your tribe. And I talk about building your tribe. Some people talk about personal board of directors, kitchen cabinet, call it what you want. But how many of you have denoted these people, but you have not activated them? Sometimes you just don't even know how to do it. The book outlines how, but it's so important, because part of betting on your own brand is getting an active tribe who will speak on behalf of you in rooms where you're not, on corners where you can't even see around. You've got to have people working on your behalf. And guess what? This is the way the majority has operated. And we haven't. So it's kind of time for us to get on board and have some of these things working for us, instead of waiting for somebody to tap us on the shoulder. And you're looking around and going, well, why is she getting promoted? And why is this one racing up the... Y'all, you better take a hold of it yourself, and you can do it.
Yeah. So I will be my best advocate.
Yeah.
The next affirmation there. And then a couple of things. I know, like I said, just for me, especially I will bet on my brand, and I'm not skipping over, some sisters have made it to the C-suite by being themselves. I can too. But also I will bet on my brand. Personally, for me, I had a problem with branding myself. I always looked at it as, bragging, right?
Mm.
And Anthony Tocco said something. Can't remember where we were. I think it may have been maybe MVP or something like that. But anyway, he was speaking and he said, "It's not bragging, it's branding." And when I tell you a light bulb, just goes off. But thinking of, and then just going back to being your best advocate, and then you have people, and not even just white people or whatever, our own people kind of try to keep you in the box, right? A little
Well,
bit.
yeah.
I mean, not intentionally, but it's safe. They don't want you to get hurt. They don't want you to to fail, to fall, to feel that hurt and stuff. And so you get that. And I would be the person that, yeah, I know how to do that. I know how to do that. I know how to do this. I can do this. But I'm not saying nothing.
Can
I
I
might say
debunk
something
branding
once or
for you
twice.
real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Can I
Yes,
debunk it
ma'am.
for you? I'm going to debunk it for you. And if anybody knows me, I have 26 years in integrated marketing and public relations, strategic communications, okay? And leadership. I've been in leadership, okay? Branding is not tactical. It's more esoteric than that, okay? It really is the experience you create for people, and most specifically, the people you want to experience you. Now, at the core of that is bringing value to those people. So it is kind of a misnomer to think that, oh, gee, I'm out there bragging, I'm talking about myself. That's very, very tactical. That's not what branding is. You can do some very subtle branding and get your point across. What I want people to do, and the book unravels it, is to look at what their value proposition is. And that means, what problem do you solve? Most of us don't even know what that is. So there's no way that we could be out there doing this. I also want to say that people that say that you're bragging or they're saying that you're self-promotional, that's another trope. I need you to understand that this is another way that people tamp you down. Okay?
Yeah.
I have been in situations where I have been speaking the company message. I have been speaking, thought leadership, but it's been branded as self-promotional simply because I speak up. I'm not supposed
Yeah.
to be the one doing it. So it's branded
Yeah.
that way. And yes, there's a mindset, there's an old corporate mindset that says, no, 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 tamp down, blend in. Let me tell you a secret. Corporate means one body. Corporate means one body. It means sameness. So any degree of stepping outside of that line is countercultural, and it's going to require some bravery, okay? So you're going to have to understand that these forces are there. But the way the world is moving, you've got to be able to understand your value, know how to say your value proposition, communicate it, understand who you are actually after, because most of us don't even know who that is. Who are we trying to influence? We've got to know these things. Otherwise, you're just posting on social.
That's it. I just think that, knowing the difference between bragging and brand use for me, or just even beginning to figure out that, because you always think of the kid in the front of the class that's got all the answers, and every time the teacher asks a question, and it's like, give somebody else a chance to do. And you have some teachers, teacher will go, well, let's let Megan answer, or let's but you feel that, and when you have that continue to happen, but the thing about it is, they know who to come to, right? If there's a problem,
They do.
They know who, call Gina. So in my mind too, thinking, y'all know what I could do. I shouldn't even have to say nothing, You're thinking, but it's all a part of, I love that, being my best advocate and betting on my brand and just making sure that, you're doing, even like you said, the subtle things. If, you're who you are, shows. Eventually, anyway, if you're around a certain group of people long, who your character doesn't change, like who you are. You can fake some stuff, but who you are at your core, your center, never changes. And I think people see that, eventually or whatever, but it's how do you, and for me, working on how do I get them to see that, to see beyond, the face, or, oh, her hair always different. She got a different, hair, something like, how do you, or just thinking,
That's
because
microaggressive,
I'm
by the way.
focused on something that I look mad right now. Oh, don't approach her, because, how do you get past that? So I really appreciated those aspects in the book, being able to lay out those guides. And then also, as we go into the last one, the importance of fine-tuning your one thing and making so employee advocacy being like a win-win. And then we will dive into, which I think probably is my favorite, I will take cues from white privilege because I am entitled. So yeah. I'll back it up a little bit about the fine-tuning, and then we'll hop into, and I know you're going to read a little bit from there. So.
Okay, so which do you want me to tackle first?
So just a little bit about the fine-tuning your one thing, because we talked about how people tell you you're good at this, you're good at that, you're good at that, and that doesn't mean necessarily that that's the one thing, right? So how do you get to that one thing and fine-tune it?
Here's the thing. It gets back to knowledge of self, and it goes back to understanding your story. There are keys to your future in your past. That will be mind-blowing, especially if you take the time to sit and think about it, okay? There are significant moments in your life that will point the way for you in your now and your future, okay? But you got to be cognizant of the themes. For me, I saw themes in my story around technology, around business, and around culture. I'm a student of culture. It's not going to go away. And I really did find that I was weaving in and out of that throughout my life. Once I did those exercises, and there's some exercises in the book that will take you down this very same path, I was able to outline my passions and my superpowers. Your passions are those things that I like to tell my clients, if you're on your deathbed, they are reading your last rites. You have gotten your last request. The chaplain is about to, right? And you raise up and say, I got one more thing I have got to do. That's your passion, okay? You usually have 2 to 3 of those. And they're big picture concepts, thoughts, theories, social issues, anything like that. And then your superpowers are those hard skills, okay? What I named the passions, that's a little bit different. Hard skills, things that if they put weights around your ankles, put you into the ocean, blindfolded you, handcuffed you, you still do that thing and do it well, okay? 3 of those things. At the apex of those 6 things that we just named, you are going to find some themes that have shown up in your past, and you'll be able to unravel those things, okay? This is the hard work that needs to be done, because often what we do is someone says, what do you do? And you start to rattle off your job title or rattle off what you're doing right now in project management, and it means nothing, because everybody does that, y'all. Somebody somewhere else does that too, okay? But there is something in you that you are called to do, and we're getting the purpose here, people. This is where the life coaching and the everything comes together. We're talking about your thing, that problem that you solve. Spend some time right there. And implicit in that is, who do you solve it for? Do you even know who that is? So we talk about personas and avatars and all of that good stuff. Sounds very marketing, but let me tell you, yes, you're not a tube of toothpaste. No, you're not even a big box retailer. But if you know that on the 11th floor, that they are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars to make sure that the brand experience for AT&T is just on point at every turn that you experience it, we can take some cues from marketing.
Nice. Yeah, so definitely just, oh my gosh, guys, so much in this book for sure. Again, and I definitely, if you do not have the book, please go get it, so that Rockstar Leaders, like I was like, this is me. Like I need to, some tweaks and work some things out, but I love that. But finally, I will take positive cues from white privilege because I'm entitled. And I think that if you want to just start reading, or if you want to say something about it before you start reading, it'd be great. But
yeah, I should frame it up. because in a couple chapters ahead of in the book, we unravel what privilege actually is, and there are all sorts of privileges. And I've given you kind of an idea of how it is a centering of one group of people. So if I'm standing on the campus of Howard University up in Washington, D.C., I am suddenly in the pocket of Black privilege, okay? Nobody's going to question my hair. Nobody's going to wonder about why does she talk that way? Nobody's going to say, why is she leading? Because everybody there is a leader. If I'm in Ghana, there's Black privilege there, but it's a little bit different. If I'm in Accra, right, and I'm standing there with Bose St. John, Bose is probably going to have a little bit more privilege than me because that's where she's from, right? And they do things a little bit differently, so they're going to be looking at me as that American, right? So you can see that you can have financial privilege, you can have educational privilege, you can have all sorts of privilege. But for this situation, we're talking about white privilege because that is what is centered in corporate America. So I'll start reading. That same year, a few of my colleagues and I attended a panel discussion at the yearly diversity conference for employees at the company. There we were, fine people, fine clothes, fine cars, fine degrees. I'm telling you, we were three smart and well-coiffed sisters, overeducated, well-credentialed, and well-heeled. We fit the corporate stereotype of Black women extremely well, which is not a bad thing at all. However, we found ourselves pondering a couple of the exchanges from the session. All I can really remember is that we were having the meeting after the meeting, you know, the one where everything that should have been said in the meeting was actually being discussed after the meeting in the hallway. Now, this next part gets fuzzy before it gets clear again. There were a lot of uh-huhs and yeah girls being said and echoed, and for the life of me, I can't remember the thing that I said that led me to say. Well, you know, if I could never say that, my sister friend, colleague, all said together, uh-huh. All was well until one of the nicest white senior officers rolled up on us and said, why wouldn't you say it, Michelle? I'd say it. All three of us looked at him blankly. First of all, this was a caucus of some of the finest sisters in corporate. He was not invited, even though we were in a common space. I turned and looked at my colleagues. We exchanged the look. Although we all liked this guy at the moment, he was not part of this particular dialogue. We were centered for that very moment. In an instant, we were not again. I would say it, he repeated, and I'll tell you why. What could they do but take my job? And you know what? I'd just go find another one. That part I remember clearly. All three of us were simply silent and looking at him. In my head, I was saying, of course you would. You're a white male, dude. And that is when it hit me. This man was privileged. He was valued in the corporate space and virtually anywhere in the US. He felt the unbridled freedom to say something without fear. And while he knew that what he would have said would have favored underrepresented groups and was anti-racist, he was absolutely certain that if his opinion was unpopular and retribution was in store, he would land again successfully somewhere else and be happy. This exchange rocked my world. Why was it that these three Black women, the picture of poise, beauty, brains, credentials, resilience, and know how, had a sheer fear of speaking up for the greater good and essentially for themselves? Most importantly, though, the last thing that occurred to us was, I'll just go find another job. How could this be? Our response was that they could take our jobs, period. End of story. Oddly, I knew all the reasons why, and thanks to some recent studies, I could articulate it with stats. I'll read reason number one, and I'm going to leave number two and three for the rest of you to read. Reason number one, what Black women believe about the workplace is cultural and generational. We come from a long history of discrimination. In fact, my dad was one of the first Black men to integrate civil service in the computer field here in Texas in the 1960s. He learned quickly to do the work and not to kick up too much dust simply to survive. It was about keeping the peace back then, to secure his retirement and his pension. When it was time, promotions came when you were tapped on the shoulder, not when you were merchandising your work. Speaking up on topics of equality was just not heard of. Did they even use the word diversity in the workplace in the 60s? The word was integration in the workplace. if anything, let's see, the word was integration. If there was any talk of anything like diversity, MLK was doing enough of that on television, and you pulled for him in the privacy of your own home. And yet they saw what happened to him. My home church in Dallas was the only venue brave enough to host Dr. King in the pulpit. Otherwise, he had no place to go in the city where within a few years, President John F. Kennedy Jr. was assassinated. Black people were simply to be happy with the jobs we were given, and we prayed someone would recognize us. If not, we simply prayed we could survive the experience without too much psychological scars. I'll leave reason number 2 and 3 to you.
Wow. Just in that little piece, so many things come out or speak out to me. Of course, we all know, right, about the media. I'm sure everybody was like, it probably just came out. I probably just got through doing that, or going to do that sometime today. But having, but the fact, just having that realization that, we know that there are certain things, or we think, right, just kind of how we've been taught generationally, that there are certain things that we can't say. There are certain lines that you can't cross. Whereas, you mentioned the white gentleman. He was like, what? You're going to go get another job. Like,
and God bless him. There are, and this is one of the threads in the book, some of the white men, many of them, and I'll tell you, most of the advocates that I have that really get things done, they're white men. One, because they're at the table. Two, they're privileged and they know they could speak within that privilege and get some things done. So it's not always a bad thing. And we get to the fact that there are 4 aspects of this white privilege that are actually positive that we can borrow from. And that's where the idea of flipping privilege comes from.
Yeah, exciting. Monica, so I know we've only got a few minutes left, but I definitely want to kind of check the audience and see if they had a question or two for Michelle before we kind of wrap things up, because we can just sit here and talk.
Yes, ma'am.
But we want to give our audience a chance.
I think that's a great idea. Does anyone have a question? I don't have anything in the chat, but does anyone have a question for either Gina or Michelle? If so, unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
Go ahead and walk in your power. Ask the question.
I think we may be all sitting on all those wisdom nuggets that were provided right now, and just so much to take in. As people are thinking about if there's a question that's going to come forward, this is an awesome book. I encourage everybody to go out, invest in yourself. It is not a long read, but it is a read with so much meat. I doubt you'll throw anything away from it. Grab the book, get it off of the website, off of her website. And I think there was a question, I can tell you this, there was a question with regards to, will it be available as an Audible book? And I know you have plans for that at some point.
Absolutely. It's not just plans. I'm finishing edits on it right now. So I promised it out this fall, but, give me a little bit of grace with the pandemic. We're going to get it out before Christmas. Cross your fingers. I know that Audible is backed up right now.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And definitely just even, for the audiobook, because I'm an audiobook person, right? So I definitely like the audiobook. I will be listening, but also just having the book with the questions and places for you to write in the back. What are your 3 superpowers? What are your 3 passions? What's your one thing? Just talking about, leveraging authenticity as a leader, going to be so beneficial for you. I would, definitely have both. Have the book and get the audio book for those of you that, that you can listen along and make notes and all of that. I just think it's amazing, the information that was shared. I think we have
one question.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we have a question from George Harris.
Hi, George.
Harrison.
Thanks, Monica. Hi, I'm Michelle. How are you today?
I'm good. Nice to meet you, George.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Listening to you, I'm hearing so many good pieces of advice, good words of wisdom for the women that I care about in my life, whether they're my sisters, my mom, family members. I'm thinking about, okay, I can just go down the list and do a lot of Christmas shopping on the website right now.
Yes, ma'am.
But
Yes,
my
sir.
question is for guys who are interested in being advocates to those um, women and girls in our life, what advice can you give that we could get that we can share with them? What can we do to be advocates for them, to support them, to even
Yes.
push them and motivate them and encourage them to spread their wings? Because there may be some women in our lives that we see potential in them, but they may not necessarily see the same potential we see.
Yes. You know what, George, bless you for bringing that to the forefront because that is a very important question. First of all, although the book is targeted at Black women and women of color, I say in the beginning of the book, I believe that my theory is that if you can solve for Black women, you can solve for anyone. So, one of my first Amazon reviews came from a white woman who actually was able to glean from this book. So there's something in there for everybody. But I love your question because your question gets to allyship and advocacy and making sure that these brothers are covering these sisters. Yes. Listen, the first thing that you need to do, don't hold back in pouring into her what has been drained out of her. And those are those positive words that you have. You see the potential in her. You see that she's amazing. This is part of the leaning out. We've got to have that tribe of brothers and sisters and white folks and white women and Latinx people and LGBTQ. It takes a village to pour into us. But you know what, brothers? You have something that no one else has. And you have that similar experience that we do. You actually understand what it is to be in the margins. And although your gender may align with the power center, you know that there's a very fine line that happens. And it's tough for you too. And you have your own set of issues that you have to deal with all the time. Let her know that you can relate to her and build her up. Now, the problem becomes when we allow some of these patriarchal sentiments to come into play. Now, we have to do the work and figure out, do I have some of these ideas about what a woman should be doing or what a Black woman should be doing, and start to peel away at some of those tropes and caricatures? Because, you know, a lot of this stuff you can say happens in corporate America, but I don't know if you know that there was a huge shakedown at Essence magazine not long ago, where there were mostly Black women. And you would think, oh, that'd be a utopic place to live. But we're really talking, or work, there, we're really talking about an intersectionality that we have to be clear and absolutely understand exists. That nuance with gender brings with it its own baggage. And sometimes it's generational again, sometimes it's buried in our religion, some of our religions. So we have to make sure that we aren't buying into these things and making sure that we are pouring right back into that sister. The second thing that I would say is this: if you see something, say something. If you're in a meeting or if you're in a virtual meeting and you see her being mansplained, white splained, whatever splained, her ideas getting jacked right there in front of her, speak up. Don't be afraid that, you know what, I'm comfortable in my, position. I've made it a little place. And you know what? I'll talk to her afterwards. Say something in the midst of it. You too, my brother, need to walk in your power. And that's going to help those sisters.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question.
I know
Very well put.
we're at the top of the hour. That was a great question. You're right. We need advocates and to be advocates for one another. I've got one final question before I'll pass it back to Gina for closing out. And this states, we know that you do coaching, but are there plans for turning any of that into a workshop? Any plans for turning it into a workshop?
Absolutely. I have at
Is
least
that a
two companies.
possibility?
Yeah, I have at least two companies that are asking me about it, one including HRD and I. So stay tuned. We'll see where that goes. But
Okay.
also in 2021, I plan to do this outside of the corporate structure. This is the thing about my coaching. I bill myself as the accessible coach while we actually move in the shadows in these big companies and they hire us and we go in and we coach people. This is part of the problem. If you don't make it to a certain level in the organization, if you never make that hypo list, you don't know that someone like me exists. So what I do is I discount my services for people who want to hire me personally. So it's 50% off that corporate rate, which is good, right? And so I'm able to not just do the coaching, but I also do seminars and webinars and all that kind of thing too. In 2021, there will be a workshop or 2 or 3 based on content in this book. So stay tuned.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. It was an awesome conversation. With that, I'm going to pivot it back to Gina to wrap it up. Thank you, El Michelle.
Thank you so much, Monica.
Thank you so much, for sure. Again, guys, right? The book, we put it how they do on TV.
Love
they
it.
put it all up so everybody can see. No thanks, definitely. You know, a wonderful. Not even. It's not a read. It's a reread. It's a continuing guide to to just getting to those 7 affirmations, just learning. And even if you do nothing else, it will help you just in yourself grow and figure out a little bit more about you, right? While we have all this time, you said, so definitely being home really has allowed us, as El Michelle said before, to get to know yourself. Like, get to know your spouse, your kids, just workplace. People are more comfortable. I'm sure you've probably gotten to know some coworkers better because they're in the comfort surroundings of their home. And so certain things, we laid back, might say a little something, but I do want to just thank everyone that took the time out to join today. Thank you so very much for choosing to spend this hour with us. Thank you again, El Michelle, for reaching out, and thank you, Monica, so much for putting this together, manning everything. I am looking forward to next year, 2021, for those seminars and workshops and everything. And I think you guys too as well. And I know that somebody noted in the chat before we go about AT&T. If you're on the VPN, you won't be able to access El Michelle's website. So, you'll have to disconnect the VPN or do it, from your personal device so that you can go out to the website and everything. And I will be there. It's some shirts out there too and some coffee mugs. I hate, me and Monica and I were talking, I hate that we didn't think.
This is what you need since you don't want to write in the book.
Yes,
it's a journal.
The journal, yes, I saw that too. I'm like, thinking, why didn't I think to order my stuff before so I could have had it on the call? But definitely, just reach out and support it. Help yourself. It is, you're going to learn for sure. But thank you, Monica, again so much. I don't want to continue on. Thank you guys for joining again, and we'll get this recording available. Probably have it. We can get it in time for the December newsletter.
And Gina, if you don't mind, just a little bitty commercial. Women of AT&T will have me keynoting on the 16th. That time has not been set yet, but look for it. It's your end of year town hall and holiday bash. So I'll see you there.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you for coming out. Joining us. I felt like we were together in the space, but thank you again, and we look forward to speaking again soon, El Michelle, for sure. We'll be.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.